Right, welcome everyone. Feel free to fire away.
Do you have any updates on the Air New Zealand work? Is it possible to just get retested?
No, look, so I'll leave the Minister to give an update, or at least health, at the usual 1 o'clock. But I'll just reiterate what we said again yesterday, that the last time this individual was tested was on the 18th of November. That was a negative test. While the individual is in China and we're still reliant on information from Chinese authorities and retesting and so on, we are undertaking everything that you would expect, including contact tracing and the usual source investigation. It may well be that we'd have to rely on return for us to be able to get some of the additional information we're after in terms of testing.
Right. Do you have any updates on vaccinations and when they might be available?
Look, what I intend to do is to make sure, because you will have had the announcements of some of our advanced purchase agreements as we've been signing them off and as those commercial arrangements have been completed. As you'll know, we've got a number that are under negotiation as well. What I'd like to do before the end of the year is pull together some of those different arrangements and agreements where we have timelines that we believe we have some level of certainty around, communicate those, and we'll look to do that before Christmas.
Just on those vaccines, will New Zealanders overseas or anybody overseas coming to New Zealand that has had a vaccine be required to quarantine when they get back here?
Oh, look, it is fair to say that the impact of vaccination will take some time to have effect on the way that we operate our borders and the resumption of normal life. The vaccinations that we're seeing, some of the early ones are not being delivered at a scale that will have significant impact straight off. That will take a little bit more time into 2021. But what we're having to do right now is plan at what point can we have enough confidence around a full vaccination program that it will substantively change our arrangements at the border.
How did you envisage the mood of the primary sector today?
Oh, look, obviously I've spoken to the primary sector forums and various different different arrangements at different times, and look, I think we have a good understanding of the issues that we're all facing. At the moment, we're very much working through some of the practical realities of implementing our freshwater work. My contact is frequent enough that we're not coming in cold to this. We're talking a lot, and I think that's going to help us get it right.
Someone ask another question.
Unfortunately, last year I believe I did. This year, caucus, it was a call, that's why you're here right now, it was a call as to whether or not I was able to come at all. I wanted to come, so I've cut into caucus, but it just means I can't extend my stay.
Prime Minister, on another matter, there were talks
I'm seeing Federated Farmers later this afternoon, though, as well.
There were talks last week with ministers and senior agricultural leaders about getting people in for summer.
Yeah.
How much progress is being made, and will you be able to make an announcement at any time soon?
We're absolutely aware that, particularly for the horticultural sector, they need certainty. So regardless of what the decision is, they need to hear that, and rather soon. What we have said to them, though, is that this side of Christmas, we have to focus on New Zealanders. We've all seen the demand. They absolutely understand that, and I think have been really acknowledged that the pressure right now into the Christmas period is for Kiwis, but we're talking about what we can do leading into March, which is when they have a lot of pressure on for their picking seasons.
The fact that there were some indications of some vacancies in MIQ, would that make you reconsider that issue?
Oh, look, RSC, they are seeking thousands. When we're talking vacancies, actually in the lead up to Christmas, essentially we don't have them. And if we do, they are very, very small numbers. Certainly not at the scale at what the horticultural sector are asking for.
Have you talked to Winston Peters since the election?
Yes, I have. And that was in the days after. There's been a couple of other occasions when we've had messages conveyed, but I haven't caught up with him properly in just a little while.
So you haven't met with him since then?
No, I haven't had the opportunity to, but I have no doubt that we will.
Well, he was in the building.
Oh, I didn't realise that he was in the building today. Well, I will take that.
No, not today, but recently he was.
Oh, well, look, I'm not always in the building at the same time. I have no hesitation in catching up with the person that I worked very closely with for the last for the last 3 years, and I expect that we will probably have a relationship going forward as well.
Is there any that relationship could be diplomatic, maybe, in terms of an appointment overseas?
I was actually more referring to personal.
Well, what about diplomatic?
That's not something that I think probably either of us has given consideration to. He's only just, of course, been in a position of not having a parliamentary role, which he's had for a number of years. So we need to give him time to consider what he wants to do next. I'll just pan around if you don't mind.
You opened your speech talking about the responsibility that those rural electorates voting for Labour affords you. What does that mean in a practical sense? Does that mean changes as far as policy agenda goes?
It's as much about the way we do things. I've always believed that some of the challenges that we face, whether it's water quality or climate change, that our goals are the same. It's just a matter of how we get there. And so the responsibility I know we have is to work very, very closely with our rural communities to get that right. It's got to be practical. And I hear when those communities say to us that we need to work on that in some areas, and that's what we're working hard on.
Are you indicating further changes when it comes to that water reform, or is the current agenda going to go?
No, look, you've already seen the kinds of adjustments that we've made to make sure that we've got that practical implementation, issues around pugging and how that applies. We're working at the moment on winter grazing issues. The outcome, again, our goal to make our waterways swimmable, to stop the degradation, we all share. We're just working on how we get there together.
Do you think more generally, the horticulture sector aside, more generally, visas for people offshore, very few being granted at the moment.
Yeah.
Do you have any sort of timeline in mind of when that might get going again, particularly, say, for example, the investor class visas?
Look, I couldn't give you a firm timeline. What we've had to do is consistently adapt to what has been a changing flow of New Zealanders. There was a period earlier in the year where we saw the demand from returning New Zealanders dip away. That allowed us to extend into different visa categories and have more eligible to come in. Obviously, as we've seen the virus spread and as we've seen the summer period come on and more New Zealanders consider relocating to New Zealand, that capacity has gone again. I imagine in the new year we'll see that come open back up again.
Would it realistically not happen until there was some sort of bubble with Australia and you get a whole bunch of that capacity
that would make a difference. It's not the only thing though. Even while we've been running full quarantine, we have still managed to bring in those ordinarily resident. We have moved on a category of students, and we have of course been able to move progressively into those who didn't have visas that classified them as in relationships with New Zealanders, but for all intents and purposes they were. So we have moved as progressively as we've been able. I'll just pan around to a couple of new ones.
Joe Biden has appointed, or says he will appoint John Kerry to a new cabinet-level position
climate
for climate negotiation, and sort of upping global ambition.
Yeah.
Is that something that New Zealand welcomes?
Oh, look, absolutely. It was one of our topics of conversation yesterday. I acknowledge that we really welcome the fact that the President-elect has signalled the re-entry of the United States into the Paris Agreement. Again, it's just an acknowledgement. This is a challenge that no country can afford to dip out of. It is a collective challenge, and I think that renewed focus on that area, which I absolutely sense from the call as well, we do welcome.
And the IPCC has said that globally emissions need to have from 2017 levels by 2030, but New Zealand's emissions are expected to be above 2017 levels by 2030. Are we doing our fair share?
Oh, and look, we have established the Independent Climate Commission and our carbon budgeting process to enable us to get onto the track that New Zealand needs to be in order to fulfil our responsibilities. And setting up that independent process, I think, will stand us in good stead so that everyone can see where we are, where we need to be and what it's going to take.
What did you do?
Two very brief questions. One, any comment on Helen Clark's suggestion that the minimum wage should be the same as the living wage? And secondly, any response to a story in Morning Report this morning about people in women's prisons not being treated very fairly?
Look, on the issue of women's prisons, some of the reports I've heard have been disturbing. This is something, though, that of course I've seen early reporting on. I haven't seen anything official. I know Minister Davis has asked to be briefed by officials to look into what he's equally described as very disturbing reports. On the issue of the minimum wage, I'm very proud of the progress that we made as a government. significant increases in the minimum wage. The living wage, of course, is a process that moves iteratively. It sits outside of the statutory minimum that is set by government, so it's a very different measurement. And I think those differences exist for good reason. We, however, have given ourselves the responsibility of extending the living wage as a good employer to those that we contract and also where our agencies are contracting.
What did you speak with the French president about this morning?
Yeah, so quite a long conversation, quite wide-ranging. We probably spoke for about half an hour. It was a good chance for us to catch up on some of the Christchurch call, particularly he has had recent experience with some of the crisis response protocols, so a chance for us to check in to see that they were working as we intended. And again, some good responses, but some real variability. So that's something that I want us to follow through on. We had a good conversation around climate issues, but probably the longest conversation we had was around COVID. We are particularly both mindful of making sure that we are supporting the Pacific region with vaccination and vaccination plans. So that's an area where we've undertaken that we'll work together to make sure that we are supporting the Pacific region.
Do you think once vaccinations are widespread and
I'll finish with you,
are being sort of easily accessible around the world, do you think it'll become a requirement for people to be vaccinated before they can come into New Zealand?
Well, look, actually, very much, our goal has to be in a position where, you have that level of immunity that we're able to safely go about our lives day to day. And so that's a question I would want to discuss more fully. What will it take us to get through immunisation up to that herd immunity, so that, that might mean that you're in a position where you are worried less about what's coming in at your border. But there's likely to be a period where that will take time. So there may be some sequencing in the way that we do this, and that's what we're working through.
How long do you think it might take?
When I say sequencing around, whether or not you have open borders but requirements at the border, or whether or not you've got enough immunisation within country that becomes less of an issue. So these are strategies we need to keep working through. And ultimately, though, 2021 will be the year of vaccine.
Is solving the housing crisis going to take unprecedented government intervention?
Well, I would say you were already seeing, significant moves in the last term around all of the housing levers we have. Stopping the sale of state houses, banning foreign residential buyers, closing tax loopholes, extending the Bright Line test, establishing an underwrite scheme for residential developers to keep them going, all of the workforce issues that we've been working on to increase the number of builders that we have. All of that has been about trying to ensure that we have a residential housing market that's thriving and producing the houses we need. What we're signalling strongly is we know that we have to do more.
Will you mimic the earthquake response and free up decades worth of land?
Well, one of the things we knew would make a difference was that national policy statement. These are tools to actually say to council, we need to grow up and out. We need to start freeing up the ability to intensify and build on underdeveloped land because the need is so great. At the same time, we need the infrastructure, so we've supported them to be able to finance that in new ways too. We all have a role to play, council and central government. Okay, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes. I thought if I put it where you can see it.
Recognise